Hi, everyone. I'm Connie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Alliance of Iowa, and this is What's Happening, which is our monthly live streamed forum where we talk with a variety of leaders across the state of Iowa on just a whole spectrum of issues. And I'm very glad that you have joined us and that you also waited for us. We had a little bit of technical difficulty, and we're very glad that all of that got worked out and we're able to bring this conversation to you. If you are live on Facebook or on YouTube, you can put comments in the comment section or questions for us, and we'll hope to get to those by the end of the session. But for now, I want to introduce to you Terese Grant, who is the state president of the League of Women Voters of Iowa. And Terese, welcome to What's Happening.
Thank you so much, Connie. It's very much a pleasure to be here and an honor to be an invited guest on this program today of What's Happening. And I'm sorry for the technical glitch, and I hope that everything goes smoothly now.
You know, we have learned over the last year and a half to be very flexible, and everyone, not just Interfaith Alliance, but to be flexible and to work with technology. And we know that sometimes technology is helpful and sometimes it frustrates us. So
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about voting and voting rights and voter suppression and an issue that is near and dear to the heart of folks at League of Women Voters. You all have always done work in that area. Interfaith Alliance of Iowa is also very interested in making sure that people can vote because it's the way that we have our most sacred right of using our voice in the voting process. And we know that a lot of things have happened over the last several legislative sessions in Iowa that look at voting, that have changed the laws, and often not in a progressive, positive way from our perspective. Some folks believe that the integrity of the system is the overarching piece that we have to make sure is in place, and other people believe that making sure every voter can vote is the higher priority. So we're going to talk about all of those things together. But before we do that, I would love for you to introduce yourself and League of Women Voters of Iowa to the folks. What is the work that you normally do, and kind of the mission and work of the organization?
Sure. Thank you, Connie.
Yes.
Again, my name is Terese Grant, and I'm currently the president of the League of Women Voters in Iowa. And this is an organization that's been around for a little over 100 years. We celebrated our 100 years a couple months before the celebration of the passage of the 19th Amendment, which was February 14th, 2020. And so the League has been around a long time doing the work that the League does. And of course, with the passage of the 19th Amendment, that gave women the right to vote. And we have been working very hard ever since to ensure that not only women, but that everyone has a right to a free and open and fair election, that this is something that is the basis of our democracy. And so it's very, very important to us. So the things that the League does to, help ensure that people can vote is, of course, that we register voters. We do that on a regular basis throughout the year at farmers markets, at grocery stores. If there's a candidate forum or some other forum that the League is involved in, then we register voters. We're also very proud to be able to go to sites where new citizens are being naturalized. That's a perfect place to register these new people who are becoming citizens and introduce them to a very important part of our democracy, and that's voting. A part of the piece to help voters is that we also work very hard to educate voters so that they know the process of voting, that they know where and when and how to vote. We have a website, vote411.org, that does that for us. We also want to educate voters as far as the educational piece on who the candidates are and what do they believe in, what is their platform. So again, we hold forums. It's on our website, information about candidates. And these are the kinds of things that we do that promote voting in every way we can. And we just follow our mission, which is empowering voters, defending democracy. Defending democracy is another part of our mission too, that deals with issues, but voting is certainly a huge part of what we do here in Iowa.
That is awesome. And in my opinion, the League of Women Voters of Iowa and nationally are one of the most respected organizations that not only works on voting, but some other issues as well. But folks really believe in the work that you do, and believe that you do that in a very fair manner. So I'm excited to have the conversation with you, and hopefully there'll be some folks that jump on and are able to watch this as well and learn from the conversation.
Sure.
So we know that the last several sessions, there has been legislation that really, in our opinion, harms people's ability to vote and access to voting. And we don't need to go through all of the past legislation, but 2021 certainly had its share of restrictions that were put into place. So if you want to talk through some of those, you don't have to do the long laundry list, but if you want to talk through some of those and the changes that are most significant that will impact Iowa voters.
Well, exactly. And, this law is, I think I just saw one of our league presidents send a document from their local auditor that has 8 pages of summary of these most recent bills that were passed. So you're right. We're not going to go through all of them, but I would like to sort of highlight some of the measures that were passed that we think are going to directly affect voters all across the state. And it was interesting, taking a look at some of these issues. It seems to deal a lot with, absentee balloting. That was something that many folks in Iowa, voted by absentee last year in 2020 during the presidential election. We were having a pandemic. Folks were very fearful of going to the polls. So absentee ballot, voting by absentee became very popular, and the election was hugely successful. We had more people vote in Iowa than we had ever before. So we were surprised that the legislature, when they came back in session in 2021, decided to put restrictions on, especially absentee voting, but also other voting as well. And here are just a few examples. For example, the request period now to request an absentee ballot is now 70 days. It used to be about 120. And you can request one from 70 days up to 15 days before the election. So that time period is shortened. And then a county auditor will send absentee ballots only 20 days before the election. So you can request it 70 days, but you're not going to get it until 20 days before the election. And then the other piece of this too, that makes it, rather the time frame really shortens, is that the absentee ballots must be in the auditor's office and by the time that the polls close on election day. Now, this is an area that, could be very problematic because, the Postal Service just doesn't run quite as quickly and smoothly as it once did. So we're seeing, if you request your ballot 20 days, or the ballot goes out 20 days before the election, and then you get it and you have to have it back there. And what if you make a mistake, and the auditor has to contact you. So, the timeline here is very fragile, and it's a concern. It should be a concern for Iowans.
Well, I would say it's just to jump in a minute.
Yes.
It's very concerning also for people who are registered to vote in Iowa. They are Iowans, but maybe they happen to be out of state also. So it could be college students that want to vote in Iowa because they consider themselves still Iowans, or it could be snowbirds. It could be whatever that is. And as you said, if the postal service is not always as quick as we think it should be. And if they make a mistake, how do they correct that in the time given they're out of state also? So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, Connie, that's exactly right. I mean, this time frame is going to be a challenge for some folks, and that's why we are concerned about the limitation that's being imposed on Iowans, and so it could create a lot of problems for folks going forward. And these election laws are going to be starting very soon. And also, of course, I don't think I mentioned this yet too. Now, in the past and last year, in 2020 in particular, county auditors were sending absentee ballot request forms to voters. And this happened in my county. I think it happened throughout Iowa. Well, that will no longer happen. If you want an absentee ballot, you need to request. If you want a ballot, then you need to request it. The auditors will no longer automatically send them to you. You have to do that in writing. And again, we talked about the timelines for that, because they're not going to be sent to you like they were in the past.
Well, and that seemed to be really a reaction to the Secretary of State sending out ballots statewide to every registered voter in the primary June, in the middle of COVID, and reminding people that the Secretary of State in Iowa is a Republican. And he made the decision that everybody should be able to vote. And because we were in the midst of the beginnings of COVID, he wanted to make sure people were able to do that. And so he sent that ballots out statewide. Republicans in the legislature took issue with that, and this piece of the legislation and now law seems to be a direct result of Secretary making that decision and taking that action.
I think you're right, and I think there is something else in the law too that states that if there is something like a pandemic that we experienced before, I think that the legislature has to give permission. I think there's something like that, some kind of stipulation in this law that this could not be done automatically by the Secretary of State, but the legislature would have to give permission in order for that to be done, to automatically send these kinds of requests to Iowans. So,
which means there would have to be a special session, right? Because they're not in session, later in May, June. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Plus, what else is on the long list?
Well, okay. So if you have an absentee ballot and you want to take it to a drop box, well, you'll need to go to the auditor's office, because there's going to be only one drop box per county throughout the state of Iowa. Only one. And it doesn't matter how big your county is. For example, Polk County, with the huge population, Polk County will have one drop box. And so that's another restriction. So, if you don't trust the Postal Service, well, you're going to have to go to the county auditor's office in order to drop off your ballot.
Well, and for that one, I worry actually more for people in rural counties. So in Polk County, we have, the DART bus system, and
yes,
there are some little towns that DART doesn't go to, but, most of the suburbs, DART buses do go, and you can eventually it's hard for some, but you can eventually find your way downtown. Certainly for those with any kind of physical impairment, may be difficult to get to the actual auditor's office. But I worry more for rural counties where you have people living very distant from the county seat, and their ability to get to that drop box, if that's the choice that they want to make.
Very good point, Connie. And that certainly happens to me, because my county seat is not in the community where I live. And so I would have to drive to Montezuma, Iowa. I live in Grinnell, in order to drop off my absentee ballot in the drop box here. So that's a very good point too, that it's not only going to affect perhaps people in the city, but also those of us in rural areas as well.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then another thing that appears in this legislation is if you're somebody who, an elderly person, for example, and you live alone and you don't perhaps have a vehicle, and you don't, then you're going to have only immediate family member or someone in your household or caregiver could deliver your ballot for you. Now you could probably, get, if you could get it to the mail, but if you want to, drop it off drop it off, it's going to have to be that kind of a person. That's true also a person with disability, somebody who's blind or also cannot deliver the ballot. They can have a designated person do that, and that person would have to make a signed statement once they got to the place where they're dropping off the ballot at the auditor's office. So these are also some restrictions that are in place that could make it a little bit more difficult, or just another piece of red tape, for those folks.
There's a piece of the legislation that passed. There actually were two bills, but so some of this is information about one bill and one about the other, but it all comes out in the wash, right? And there's a section about inactive status as well, and I think that is confusing, and also a lot of people don't know that was part of the legislation. And you want to walk us through that a little bit?
Yes, very true. So my understanding is that if a person does not vote in a general election, then they will automatically be put on an active voter list. And actually, right after these bills were passed this past spring, Secretary of State Paul Pate sent then a letter to these folks who did not vote in the presidential election in 2020, letting them know that they're on an active status. Now, this created quite a stir in some of our local leagues, because on that list that went out this last spring were young people, 17 and a half year olds who registered to vote. In fact, some of our local leagues, went to the high schools in order to, get them registered and, get them, really powered up to go vote. Well, maybe they didn't vote, and now they got a letter saying, now you're on an active status. Well, what does that do to a young person who's just all of a sudden, been registered to vote, and now they're told, oh, sorry, you're on an inactive list? I mean, yes, of course they can vote, but I mean, that's somewhat demoralizing. I thought that was really something that was really unfortunate to have happen this last year.
Absolutely. And kind of to that point, are there groups of people, demographic indicators where people are more likely to be impacted by legislation such as this, whether it's in Iowa or whether it's in Georgia, when laws are passed like this that put limitations on voting, absentee, whatever the instance? Are there groups of people that are more impacted by that action?
Well, sure. I think we already mentioned, Iowa has a large population of people over 65. I think the elderly, certainly are impacted. I think that because of the time constraints, people who have families who work perhaps 2 or 3 jobs and have a limited amount of time. I think folks who work 12-hour shifts because of the shortened time period to vote could run up into some problems. And, you might even, maybe Connie, maybe you could have thought of already some other people too who you think could be impacted by these bills.
Yeah, we always talk about voter suppression and voter restrictions really impact communities of color disproportionately. And some of that has to do with other indicators and other factors that are the intersection of all of that. But we see, historically, that is a known fact that voter suppression has impacted communities of color disproportionately. But that still is the case when you talk about voter ID, which was legislation in 2017, and all of these pieces that pull in the ability to act on that sacred right. And I would say people in the disabilities community as well, being able to get your absentee ballot and not being able to give it to your neighbor or other folks, those kind of things, your church, et cetera, to deliver your ballot. So there are definitely all those that you mentioned and others that are disproportionately impacted.
Exactly.
We have city and school board elections coming up this fall. If folks don't know, it'll be in November. And So on that local level, local offices, what can people expect when they go to vote or go to request an absentee ballot? Does this all impact this fall's election?
Indeed, it does. In fact, I called an auditor's office this morning just to verify, to make sure that these rules go into effect for this election. Some people call it an off season, but not really, because city elections and county elections are very important. The school board as well. But no, these laws will be going into effect this fall. So again, I know that some of our local leagues are already working on rolling out some education pieces to help folks know that these new laws will be going into effect, so that you need to start thinking about voting and have a plan, because it's slightly different than it was before. So I know we'll be working on this effort to make sure that people know about these changes, so that when they go to the polls or request absentee ballots, that they know what to expect.
That's great. I'm glad you all are doing that work. In addition to that, I know that you also are doing some other work because you don't agree with the change in law that happened, change in laws that happened, and so you're doing some additional work as well. And I don't know if you're prepared to disclose some of that, but would love to have you talk a little bit about that.
Yes, because you and I talked about this before too. Yeah, we're in the process of designing a campaign that we would like to get signatures from Iowans, those who perhaps disagree with the laws that were passed in 2021. That was something that we heard, during the session, was that, Iowans want these bills, they want these changes. Well, we're not so sure that they do. So we're going to probably send around some petitions and get signatures, and have folks, say that, no, we don't agree with some of these election laws that were passed. And we're going to try to collect as many signatures as we can, and then take them to the legislatures in 2022 at the beginning and say, here are some Iowans that don't agree with these election laws, and let's see if we can make some changes. One of our board members is a past legislator, and like she says, there's no bill that's set in stone. These things can always be changed, and we need to make things better and make sure that they serve all Iowans.
That's awesome. Before I get to my next question, Terese, tell us your email, and if folks want to engage in the work that you're doing. And then Kristen from our office, who's behind the scenes, she'll put that in the chat for folks. But if you tell us your email, then people will have access to that.
Sure, I'd love to. So it starts with my initials, which are TAG, tag, and then there's a period, LWVIA@gmail.com.
Okay, tag.lwvia@gmail.
That's correct.
Awesome. And Kristen already has it up. I knew she would. So, and thank you again for that work that you're doing and engaging legislators in that conversation. And it is difficult to get a law changed, but it is not impossible, and it is the right thing to do, I think. I want to go back to this idea. I talked at the top of the show about the differing, kind of almost a differing worldview of how folks look at voting, and whether that is the integrity of the system and very focused on maintaining the system, or whether it is the making sure at the top of the decision making, that the top of the priority is people's right to vote and having access to voting. And that is really a disparity oftentimes between the two main political parties, but in other ways as well. How do we balance that, as a state, in communities, as a nation? How do we really balance both of those pieces? Certainly, we don't want people voting who should not be voting. We don't want bots from Russia to be impacting all of those things that we saw in past elections. But people should have the right to vote, and we should make that access as easy as possible. So how do we balance that as a country?
Right. Well, and that's a very, a good question to ask. And I do believe that our election officials do everything they possibly can to make sure that our elections are safe, that they monitor the situation. I don't think that we have a problem perhaps with fraudulent voting. I think that's been proven. When was it, a couple of years ago? And I think it was in 2014 when our Secretary of State, Matt Schultz, did an investigation on voter fraud, and came up with very few. So I don't think we have an issue, in this country with voter fraud. I do think we have an issue with misinformation, that people, somewhat they think that there's something going on because of what happened in 2020, and with the misinformation that was coming out after the election, that it was stolen. It wasn't stolen. I mean, there was so many lawsuits and so much, recounts to come up with the same result. So, I think we here in the United States, we can trust our elections. There's not going to be anything from I don't think, voters anywhere. But you're right, Connie. I do think that, because we know that there has been, things about foreign countries trying to do something with our systems, that we do have to watch our systems and make sure that there's no kind of interference from the outside or even inside. But I'm confident that our election officials will keep our voting safe and do everything they possibly can to make sure that when we go to the polls and when the results are coming in, that it's done fairly and freely, and we can trust them to do what they've already done and will continue to do to keep elections safe.
Terrific. Terese, is there a particular way that folks can be helpful, can join in the work that League of Women Voters is doing all over the state? What are you needing from folks now?
Well, we can always use new members to help us, again, register voters and do the things that we do, like I mentioned earlier. I should also mention too that the League is nonpartisan, and that's something that we, for example, we don't support candidates or we don't support parties. So, but we do support democracy, and the work that we do ensures that democracy is fair and free. And so people who are interested in joining the League to help us do things like register voters and perhaps help us with this petition that we're talking about doing, and then also advocate our legislators on issues that we are working on these days. They're free to contact me or look at our website, lwvia.org, and contact local leagues if they're around this state, or we do have people who join as a member at large. But or contact me. You have my email address. So we're always welcoming new folks who'd like to help us do the work of the League of Women Voters.
Terrific. And Kristen put the links to in both the YouTube and Facebook comment section for the League of Women Voters of Iowa. And so you can find that information there and learn more about the League if you want to go to their website or email Terese. Her email is in the comment section as well. So any last words that you want to tell folks about voting and the voting laws that have come up, or how they can be active on all of that?
Well, I just want to say that I hope that everybody listening here always votes, that this is your right, and this is something that serves our democracy, that everyone should take advantage of this opportunity, because our elections determine so much at not just the national level, but on our local level. We talk about our schools, our school board elections, our city offices, county offices. These things are just as important as what happens in Washington. We used to say all politics is local. Well, it's kind of gotten local, state, and national, but certainly it's a very important thing to do, to be a voter and to champion voters. And and if there's anything that the league can do to help folks around, just let us know, and we'll help. We'll help you too.
Thank you so much, Terese Grant, State President of League of Women Voters of Iowa. So grateful for your time and for your knowledge and for the work that you and the League does every day on behalf of Iowans. Thank you. And
thank you too, Connie, for all the work that Interfaith Alliance does throughout the year too. It's a great organization, and I feel very honored to be invited here today.
Thank you so much. And to everybody who's listening, thanks for being on, and thanks for listening in on the conversation. You can find more information, as I said, at the League of Women Voters website, lwvia.org, or you can email Terese directly. And so we're just glad to have everyone with us for this conversation. And as I have been saying each week this summer, please do register to vote. If you have not done so, please do that. And if you have registered to vote, please help somebody else register to vote. It matters in our democracy that everyone who is able to vote can vote. And for now, please do stay safe and take care and have a great week. Thank you, everyone.